Welcome to Flourishing Flame, from burning out to burning bright with therapist and coach Leah Brown. Are you a people helper or caregiver, feeling overwhelmed, distant, cynical, and crispy around the edges? Join me to defeat burnout by learning how to manage stress and create deep connective relationships with others so that you can pursue your calling, providing light and warmth to those around you. Welcome to episode 43 of the Flourishing Flame podcast. My name is Leah Brown, and I'm your host. If you've been a longtime listener, you know that my children are involved in musical theater, and this fall has been musical theater on steroids. And we have had children involved in 3 different productions. It's our first professional show and then 2 youth shows. My 18-year-old daughter has made her debut in Beautiful, the Carole King musical at a local professional theater. And then I had 2 of my boys were involved in Les Miserables. This is made for a lot of busyness, and I'm going to talk more about that later. But I wanted to touch on the ideas that we were talking about in episode 38, that meaningful connection is relationship connection that feeds and encourages us. It provides us fuel. Meaningful connection is found in relationship where we are valued for who we are, not just what we do. And meaningful connection is demonstrated in priority, preference, and time. We establish that meaningful connection requires authenticity, vulnerability, and observation. Today, I'd like to talk to you about the authenticity that is required in meaningful connection. We mentioned earlier that authenticity is the importance of being ourselves in meaningful connection. The dictionary version that we used when we talked about this before was the quality or condition of being authentic, trustworthy, or genuine. The quality of being authentic or of established authority for truth and correctness. Genuineness, the quality of being genuine, not corrupted from the original. I look at authenticity in this context of how we show up in relationship and how we show up in the world as living a life in harmony with your values. We've talked about values before in previous episodes, so I'm not going to go into a lot of depth about it, but your values are kind of your driving force that help you to frame how you see the world and choose what's important to you to pursue. So as we're looking at being authentic and living a life in harmony with our values, I was challenged to look at these characters through this lens of what is the story of relational connection, authentic connection in these stories. So in Cinderella, and this is not the kind of typical Disney version of Cinderella, it's a version of Rodgers and Hammerstein's most recent Broadway version. So we have Ella and Prince Topher, and they're both seeking meaningful connection, as they put it in the show, looking for a friend in the world. And we see that Ella has high values of loyalty and compassion. She lives with her stepmother and stepsisters after her father's death. Ella doesn't allow the abuse and isolation and neglect that she's suffered to stamp out those things that are true values for her. Then we see Topher, who's a dragon-slaying, ogre-slaying prince who has been sent away to school after his parents' death, and he is looking for who is he. And as the story progresses, you see their authentic self being able to be present in relationship with each other, and how when they're in the relationship together, they're able to encourage the other person's authentic self and values to come through. And then kind of juxtapose this with the story of Les Mis, where we have Jean Valjean, who was imprisoned for 19 years, and his original crime was stealing bread to try to save the life of his sister's child. And we see how his personal values of justice and compassion were kind of reactivated in the grace that was shown to him by a priest who, I don't want to tell you the whole story, but he gave him two gifts. He gave him a gift of saving him from being incarcerated and gave him the gift of some silver that allowed him to restart his life. And so through the course of his life, these values of justice and compassion come out in how he is able to relate to the people that work for him, how he's able to relate the people in the town where he's the mayor, and how he is able to give of himself sacrificially to save the life of a young girl. And so just looking at these characters and kind of giving you a taste, I want to talk about what are some of the problems that we can run into when we are not living authentic lives, when we're not living lives in harmony with our values. Well, the first thing that pops up is that when we are living lives that are not in harmony, we end up living a lie in a sense. We're not able to be honest with ourselves or with other people. And when you are trying to have this mask, because that's what it ends up being, when you're not living in alignment with your values and harmony with your values, then you tend to have this mask where your true self is covered up. And when we're living with that mask on, sometimes it can be hard to remember all the things that are part of that mask, that are part of that persona. And that requires a lot of work on our part. That work that's happening in the back of our minds on how we are supposed to present in this situation with this group of people because we're not being true to our authentic self and to our values. Maintaining that mask takes a lot of work. Even if the work that it's taking is that back of your brain work that is kind of always running, it increases your stress level because you're not coming out of what is truly the most important to you. And so everything that we're doing in this podcast and every episode is geared towards helping you to operate in a way that reduces your stress load so that you are able to do the things that you're passionate about doing and caring for others. Sometimes when we have this mismatch of our internal values, it's not like this thing that we're trying to deceive anyone. It's that we don't understand what really motivates us. And when we try to operate out of what we think should motivate us, it actually increases our stress level. Feeling overwhelmed and stretched too thin? With work invading your home life and vice versa? It's time to reclaim control and restore balance. Imagine prioritizing yourself, mastering stress management, and finding a clear path through the chaos. I've crafted the perfect course to help you navigate burnout, reconnect with your core values, and regain a sense of peace. Are you ready for a fresh start? You can learn more about the Burnout Buster Blueprint at my website, leahlittlebrown.com. Let's turn this moment into your turning point. If you're listening to this podcast, you probably work with people in some way, shape, or form. And sometimes those roles that we have, those jobs that we have, seem like we should have certain values. And to an extent, we do have a value alignment that we gravitate towards in the work that we do. But there are some times where we have this perception that we're supposed to be a certain way or value things to a certain degree based on what we're doing. And so I wanted to share with you a story of someone that I worked with who was in HR and really felt like the values of compassion and really wanting to support other people and wanting to be a good listener were values that she should have. And they are values that are important in that role. But she also, for herself, had values of conscientiousness and efficiency and wanting to get things done. And there was this conflict in her internally, and she didn't even realize it until we started talking about what are her values and what are the things that are important to her. And as we were able to tease that out and to see where her values are kind of like sandpaper in a sense, that there was a little bit of friction with the things that were very important to her value-wise internally, personally, and the things that she expected that she was supposed to value in her job, being able to see that actually her values were important in her job. And the work that she was doing required both the ability to be compassionate to the person who was coming to her and to be able to be efficient in getting done what needed to be done for that person. And that really, it was her ability to harness those values that seemed at first like they were contradictory to her position, allowed her to lean into those values so that she could do her job in a way that was personally fulfilling for her. Popping back over to the musicals that I was mentioning earlier, in both of these musicals, the lead characters were in a place where they had a mask literally in the case of Cinderella, and a mask figuratively in the case of Jean Valjean, where they were not able to, at one point in the story, share their full self, be authentic to who they truly were in all of themselves. And we're going to talk more about moving from this place of kind of having this mask around your authenticity and not allowing yourself to be truly in harmony with your values in the next episode. If you don't want to have to wait till the next episode to find out what happens with these characters, there's still the opportunity, if you're local in the Fredericksburg area, to be able to see both of these shows next weekend. You can find the links to the tickets in the show notes. Until next time, take care. Thank you for joining me today. If this episode added kindling to your flame, please leave a review and pass it on to a friend who could use some encouragement. You can connect with me and find additional resources at leahlittlebrown.com. Now go forth and burn in all your brilliance.